Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Anas Alhajji. We have a lot to talk about. Dr. Anas Alhajji is an expert in all things oil, gas, energy policies, geopolitics. Also, you can follow his work over at Energy Outlook Advisors on Substack. Any links I'll do my best to put into the Substack post with this podcast. It's a very loads to talk about today. Dr. Anas Alhajji, welcome to the show.
Uh, Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
A lot's happened in the last 3 or 4 days. We are recording this on the morning of Tuesday, the 17th of June. Obviously, we've seen a lot of issues flaring up between Israel and Iran. You can take this in whatever direction you want to, because there's people
Sure.
talking about Strait of Hormuz, etc.
Yes.
I'll
First of
leave it with you.
all, to the audience and the subscribers, stay away from the mainstream media. Be very careful of what you hear, simply because we have a lot of misinformation on both sides. On the other side, the media is exaggerating things, and I'm going to mention a couple of examples. They are important for everyone to hear. The first one is the media. There was like headline news: Israel hit the largest gas field in the world. This is a completely misleading headline, because the largest gas field in the world is shared with Qatar, and most of it is with Qatar, and there are no problems with Qatar. Iran has the smaller portion of the field, and this field is being developed in 24 phases over a period of 25 years, and they are in phase 14. And in phase 14, there are about 30 projects, and within them, there is a very small refinery that has 4 units. And what was hit by the drone is 1 unit of the four of a refinery that is part of a number of projects in phase 14 out of 24 phases in the smaller part of the gas field.
Mhm.
Has no impact on oil, has no impact on gas supplies, has no impact on anything. But the fear mongering here, especially from the media, by saying that Israel hits the largest gas field, is just a complete nonsense. So this is an example of exaggeration. The other example of exaggeration, and this went viral, that a member of the Security Committee in the Iranian parliament said, we are studying closing the Hormuz Strait. The parliament, called Majlis in Iran, has no say at all in security issues, has no say at all in foreign policy, has no say in any big issues, period, let alone this committee. So this guy was just angry, and he made a statement, and then it went viral. There was nothing from the leadership of Iran or the official statement or anything at all regarding the Hormuz Strait. Nothing, zero. But that will bring us to the common misunderstanding that Hormuz Strait is going to be closed and oil prices will go to $200. Some people are talking about $120, $130. This is a complete nonsense, and I'll explain why. The Hormuz Strait is wide. Iran cannot close it, especially that most of the routes for the ships are in Oman, and they are not in Iran. So the strait is between two countries, Oman and Iran. There are shallow waters in Iran, the deep waters are in Oman. So the ships go from Oman, they don't go from Iran. So for Iran basically to close it, then they have to occupy Oman. And that by itself is a serious problem. But here we have to make a distinction between closing the Hormuz Strait and causing problems or disturbances in the Hormuz Strait. These are two different things. Here I am talking about closing it. Iran cannot close the Hormuz Strait for several reasons. The first one is that they don't have the capability to do it. It's wide, and it's mostly in Oman. The second one is it is well protected. There is a US Navy, there is a British Navy, there is a French Navy, there is an Indian Navy, and then there are the Gulf states navies. And there is a coalition of 34 countries. They are entrusted with protecting navigation in the Gulf, and that group basically is based in Bahrain. So there is no way to do it. And if we look at all the studies being done by the experts and the War College and others in the United States, some of the studies basically said, look, the Iranian Navy can control the strait for a few hours and it will be completely wiped out. I mean, the Iranian Navy. So the maximum impact, basically, if they want to do it, it's only for a few hours and that's it. But there are other questions we have to ask here. Is it in Iran's interest to close the strait? And the answer is no, because 80% of Iran's imports come through the strait. In fact, most of the stuff that Iranians eat on daily basis come through the strait, which means that if they block it, they are going to choke themselves first before anyone else. So it is not in their interest. And the other fact is all their seaborne exports of oil and petrochemicals go through the strait. And we all know that the economy of Iran basically is in deep trouble, and they need every single dollar or yuan or whatever currency they are using. They need it. They cannot stay without it at all. They need those revenues. So they need to export so they can get the money so they can survive, and they need the food so they can survive. So there is no incentive for them to close the strait. The other issue is if even they cause problems or disturbances in the strait, the primary losers are Iran's friends, not Iran's enemies. Why? 83% of the oil that leaves the Gulf goes to Asia. It does not go to the US or Europe. 83%. And the other 17% basically go around the world. So who is going to be hurt? Iran's friends, mainly China and India. And if you look at LNG, liquefied natural gas, 87% of it goes to Asia. 87%. So it does not make any sense for Iran to cause any problems in the Gulf at all, because the primary losers are themselves and their friends. The United States does not import anything from Iran. The United States imports of oil and gas, does not import gas from there, but the US imports from the Gulf is very tiny, very small. The US basically can enjoy its life without any problems, even if the Hormuz Strait is completely closed. So on one side they cannot, on the other side it is not in their interest. Last night we had 3 tankers or ships on fire in the Gulf of Oman, close to the Hormuz Strait, across the Fujairah port, and the reason was a collusion. It has nothing to do with the war, and the collusion happened. Some people are suggesting probably because of jamming by the Iranian Navy, so it's affected the signals. So we don't know, but it has nothing to do with any hits or attacks. The other related point that people must understand is that we say the Iranian regime. What do we mean by the word regime? What we mean here is we have a state, which is the government. Okay, that's a government. And then we have supporting entities. So the sum of the government and the supporting entities like the National Guard, that's the regime. So those guys, when you talk about the government and then we have the supporting entities, they don't have the same interest all the time. Sometimes they have conflicting interest. So either the groups themselves have conflicting interest, or the National Guard has a conflicting interest with the government itself. For example, the government probably has an interest in signing a deal with the United States and going back to the 2014 deal, nuclear deal. But the Revolutionary Guard may not have that interest because they control all the oil trade. They control all the trade coming to Iran because of the sanctions. They make a lot of money out of those trades. then it's not in their interest to normalize it because they lose all the money. Because if everything is normal, then the money will go to the government, will not go to the national guard.
Mhm.
So we might end up with some elements, whether from the regime itself or the supporting militias in Iraq or Yemen or other countries, causing problems in the Gulf. I don't think that the government of Iran, again, and we are making a distinction here between the government and the regime. I don't think that the government of Iran will cause any problems in the Gulf. Zero. But members of the regime or the supporting militias might cause problems. And we've seen that before. We've seen attacks on Saudi Aramco. We've seen attacks on oil tankers in Fujairah, for example. So these things could happen. And the biggest problem that we fear right now is not hitting an oil tanker or oil tanker on fire. The biggest fear we have is a major oil spill because the
Mhm.
impact of it is not only environmental, it will literally affect navigation. And
Mhm.
if it's affect navigation, then we are going to have less oil or gas or whatever shipments in the region. So is Iran able to close the Hormuz Strait? No. Will elements of the regime are able to cause problems in the Strait and in the Gulf? Yes. What is the impact? It depends on what they are doing. Generally speaking, the impact is limited, but if we have a major oil spill, that could have a major impact. The second question that follows immediately after this is what is the impact of this war on oil prices, and what if we lose the Iranian oil exports? In general, we've already seen the impact. The initial impact after the surprise attack on Iran, oil prices went up by 14%. And then by the end of the day, we ended up with 7% increase. It did decline yesterday. It's supposed to decline today, but then President Trump made the statement about people should leave Tehran, which is one of the strangest things I ever seen in my life. I mean,
Mhm.
Tehran has millions of people. He caused chaos at 3 a.m. in the morning in the city where people trying to flee. They seriously think that Tehran will be attacked by a nuclear bomb, and then there was a retreat after that. So we don't know why he did this and why he made this statement. But what if we lose all the Iranian oil exports? Of course, there is no way we can lose all the Iranian exports. The area being in several wars, Iran being at war before, and they continue to export oil anyway, we might see a decline. But let's take the scenario, the extreme scenario of losing all the exports. Iran exports 1.7 million barrels a day. Most of that goes to China. Probably about 1.55 goes to China. So China is the main customer of Iran. If they all stop, that means the country that's going to be affected is China, not the world. But something strange happened before the attack. Just before the attack, the 2 weeks before the attack, Iranian oil exports increased to levels we have not seen in so long. And the question is why? At the same time, China was storing oil like crazy to the extent that Chinese oil inventories right now are the highest on record. And the major increase happened just in the last 2, 3 weeks. So is this a coincidence or they knew something? But the idea here is, will oil prices increase substantially because we are going to lose the Iranian oil exports? And the answer is no. And here is why. China has so much oil in inventories, way more than the United States, and they are going to use that. They can literally go and get the Iranian oil from inventories that they bought at lower prices than now, and do this for several months without increasing imports from any other country, without any problems. So the compensation is there. So this is the first line of defense.
Mhm.
The second one is that we have the group of eight in OPEC plus. OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. We have eight members who made voluntary cuts in the last 3 years, and they are unwinding those cuts and bringing production. In April, they increased the production ceiling by about 138,000 barrels a day. Then they expedited that, and they expedited that in May by for 11,000 barrels a day, and then in June for 111, then in July, and now they are going to meet to decide what they are going to do in August. And most likely they will go for 411,000 barrels a day, although the market does not need that amount. But again, we are talking about production ceiling. It may not translate into actual production. So that's the second line of defense. If they want to increase production, they can. At the same time, let's remember that the group of OPEC, especially in the Gulf, they have a tremendous spare capacity. So if something happened, basically they can just increase this production from capacity, and they can add a significant amount. And the third line of defense is if oil, let's say oil prices go to $90, we'll see President Trump releasing oil from the strategic petroleum reserves the same way Biden did. At the same time, uh, the oil producing countries right now, they use a lot of oil during the summer months, additional amounts of oil during the summer months, because of the large demand for cooling, which requires massive amount of electricity. So to meet that demand, they use oil to burn in power plants, whether it's diesel or fuel oil or others. And the increase is about, like in the Gulf region, is about 1.2 million barrels a day. Here comes September, let's say the middle of September or the end of September. Now they have a million barrel or more that they don't need anymore in domestic consumption, and that will be freed for exports. So we still have a large amount of oil available to the market, and therefore the whole idea of oil prices going to 100, 120 or more is not going to happen. People are saying, well, Anas, why you are saying this? We've seen it in 2022 with the Russians when oil prices increased substantially. Yes, but the circumstances are completely different right now. Again, Chinese oil inventories at record high. That was not the case before. Yes, they have very high inventories, but not as high as today. At the same time, at that time, the oil producing countries were increasing production, so the spare capacity was way lower than today. At the same time, they were not willing to cooperate with Biden at that time and increase production. Now they will cooperate with Trump. So the situation between that time and now is different, especially that various groups, including the International Energy Agency, predicted that we will lose 3 to 5 million barrels a day from Russia. 3 to 5 million, which is multiples of the amount that we might lose from Iran. Of course, we did not lose it, but that was the expectation. So the idea here is the current circumstances are completely different from 2022. And that's the bottom line.
A lot to uncover them. Thank you for going, really in depth in that, just so I've got this summary correct in my head. Ignore mainstream media, which absolutely I agree. And then Iran, for a multitude of reasons, will not close the Hormuz Strait purely because, number one, the shallow waters are in Iran, most of it's actually in Oman, and the impacts of closing the strait is actually going to impact Iran more than it would do anyone else. So therefore, it's not in Iran's interest at all to close the Hormuz Strait. And the biggest uh, challenge or the biggest thing that could implicate things moving forward would actually be an oil spill, nothing else.
Correct. And I would like to add one more point, if you don't mind. People, if you go to social media and on some TV stations, people are throwing the expression regime change casually, as if you are playing a soccer game and then the coach will come in and change a player. I mean, they are literally speaking like this, which is a complete nonsense. Of course, here we have to distinguish between two terms,
Mhm.
and it's very important for everyone to understand the differences. We have the term of regime collapse and we have regime change. The worst outcome of this war is regime collapse. Regime collapse is bad for everyone, including Israel, the United States, and every Arab country in the region. It's bad for China, bad for Russia, for everyone, bad for Iranians. No one wants a regime collapse. Regime change, people are throwing it casually, and this is a complete nonsense for several reasons. Israel, with the help of the superpowers, been pounding Gaza for more than a year and a half to kick out a small group of people called Hamas. For a year and a half, and Hamas is still there. And those people think bombing Iran in 3 days, they are going to have a regime change for a country that is massive and big and powerful. So it's just funny when you have someone who you think, they have masters or PhD and they have 30 years experience, just throwing those expressions like this on TV, just a complete nonsense.
Mhm.
So when we talk about regime change, we have to ask three questions. The first question is, what is the future of Israel if there is no Hezbollah, no Hamas, no Houthis, and no Iranian regime? If all the enemies basically are gone from the Middle East, what is the justification to support Israel? What is the justification to send weapons? What is the justification to send money to Israel? If all the enemies are gone. That's why I seriously think that after this war ends, a few months later, we are going to see all kinds of reports saying, oh, the nuclear program is still safe.
Mhm.
Okay? The fact is, even if Israel wiped out completely the nuclear program in Iran, wiped it out completely, it's not in the interest of the regime to admit it. It's exactly the opposite. They would exaggerate. And it's not in the interest of Israel to say that it wiped out the nuclear program in Iran, because that's the only way it can continue the support from the United States and Europe. So all of a sudden we have kind of a shadow or a ghost of nuclear program that Israel and the Iranians are supporting because
Mhm.
both make money out of it. The second question is, there is no NATO bases in the Caspian Sea. There are no US bases in the Caspian Sea. And Iran and Russia share borders through the Caspian Sea because there are 5 countries that control the Caspian Sea. Do you think Russia will accept a US friendly government in Iran? So NATO will be next to Russia and NATO will have a base in the Caspian Sea? We've already been at war since 2022 for 3 years over Ukraine because NATO got closer to Russia. So will Russia accept it? So that's another one. So when we talk about regime change casually like this, we are missing all those big issues. And the third question is, will China accept a US friendly government in Iran while China depends heavily on resources of Iran? And Iran is one of the biggest customer of consumer goods from China. At the same time, it's the way of China to Europe through Pakistan and Iran to Europe. So is China going to give it up just like that? So we got to be very careful when people say, oh, regime change, and the Iranian people want this, and the Iranian people want this. Yes, we know the Iranian people want this. Okay. but the issues are not as simple as being pictured. And the related issue to this, and we have to remember that any regime change that took place in Iran in the last 120 years, it happened from the inside. It did not happen from the outside. So we have the first regime change when the father of the Shah, who was the first Shah of Iran in modern history, basically he was like a head of police or something like this. He jumped on the ruler and killed him, and he became a Shah. So that was domestic. And then during the World War II, the UK and the Soviet Union invaded Iran, and under complete occupation, they changed the government from the father to the son. So you need a complete occupation basically to change the government if you want to talk about outside influence.
Mhm.
And then you have the elections of 1951 when Mossadegh was basically sworn in as a prime minister and the Shah ran away to Italy. That was domestic. And then in 1953, you have a coup, military coup. Yes, it is supported by the United States CIA, but it was supported by the inside and by the streets in Iran. And then you have the 1979 revolution, which was an inside story too. So if you think just international pressure is going to do it, the history of Iran tells us either you have to occupy the country, which is not a possibility right now, or it has to come from inside. And from inside, basically, you need the military to act. And we know that the military is weakened and the Revolutionary Guard basically is taking over. So the history even does not support the idea of regime change just because of international pressure.
Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts, and there are so many different directions that this could go. Is there anything that you haven't spoken about that you think people need to be aware of
Yes,
before we wrap
yes,
up?
yes. People and analysts basically ignored the international impact of the crisis of attacking Iran. Right now, as we speak, we have major power shortages in Egypt and Iraq. And the reason why, because Israel was afraid that Iranian missiles will attack its largest gas field in the Mediterranean,
Mhm.
so they shut it down. And when they shut it down, they stopped gas exports to Egypt. And Egypt is already suffering from shortages of gas and electricity. And all of a sudden this happened and there is a total panic in Egypt. The only way to provide electricity basically is to burn diesel in power plants. And we learned a couple of days ago that they have their inventories of diesel are only for 7 days. And if they want to import diesel from Saudi Arabia, it takes more than that. So we have some serious problems there. And then Iran reduced its gas exports to Iraq significantly. And as a result, we have power shortages in Iraq. The most important point here is this increase in demand for diesel, fuel oil, etc., to compensate for the Israeli gas and the Iranian gas means higher demand for oil, and that supports the price of oil.
Mhm. I think that's probably a very good place to leave it. I have a lot of questions about the overall outlook of oil moving forwards, but I don't think the time is right to talk about that. Maybe we should do that in another episode.
Sure,
Anis, I've got here,
sure.
if people want to find you, Energy Outlook Advisors, that's Anas Alhajji, EOA.substack.com. So that's ANASALHAJJIEOA.substack.com. And then on Twitter, Anas Alhajji. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes as well. Are there any other final words and any other places that people can
Yes,
find you
thank you.
before we
Thank you
sign
very
off?
much. We do have two major publications with a
Mhm.
large number of followers. We have the Daily Energy Report, and that's even individual investors and others can afford. And then we have the Energy Outlook Advisors newsletter, which is mostly directed to institutional investors and companies. if people would like to subscribe to that. And we also have a subscription on Twitter where we provide certain information that we don't make it public. So it's kind of special. And we have a large number of subscribers there too.
Perfect. All of those links I will put in the show notes that come with this podcast and video. Uh, Dr. Anas Alhajji, I've learned a lot from today. It's very, poignant that we're speaking at this time. Thank you for your time and look forward to catching up. Maybe in 2026 when we can have a more general and more hopeful conversation about things that are going on.
Absolutely. But probably the best time is toward the end of the year because that's when we make our forecast for the following year.
Sounds good. I'll touch base then. Thank you very much and speak soon.